Jordan, so happy to have you on the podcast. How are you today?
Doing good, Daniel. Very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm John Kales. I'm following this guy for a while now, and he's a persuasion expert. He's an author, he's a sales coach, and I myself owe him probably a couple of €1,000 because I've stolen so many of his sales tactics that I use for my own private practice. And in this podcast, I would like to learn a little bit about his journey of becoming, what he learned from being a sales coach, and overall his take on happiness, success in the world. So, welcome on the show, Jordan, once more.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to chatting.
Ask you what you do. What do you say to them outside of my butchering introduction?
Yeah, no, that's great. When someone asks me what I do, I like to say I'm a sales consultant, but what that really entails is I help people improve their sales effectiveness or efficiency. I find that most people, when number one, I think everyone is a salesperson. Everyone's in sales, everyone's selling whatever they do. You don't have to be in sales to be selling because you're always selling something. But I help, let's say, businesses, business owners, sales teams for businesses improve their effectiveness when they're I like to sell high ticket items on, let's say, consultations or calls. So in that process, the most important part is having the communication and persuasion skills to actually close someone. And that's where I specialize. So the sales strategies, the objection handling strategies that are involved in being effective on a sales call or person-to-person meeting, where your responsibility as a salesperson is closing someone, getting the sale, having that transactional relationships where you get the money and you provide them the service, product, whatever you have to offer.
I discovered your work when I was an online blogger in the mental health field. I also had my podcast, and I ventured into coaching and consulting and therapy myself. And at the beginning, I didn't know how to get clients, and this is when I downloaded your ebook Sales Mastery, and it really helped me a lot to get going on the site and just to discover prospecting in particular as a way for people who are not inside of the therapy system but who need to get clients by themselves, basically. And one of the most surprising things that I noticed, Jordan, is I'm helping a lot of people to overcome, for example, disempowering behavior patterns. And I feel that now that I know more about sales is that I am able to negotiate with my clients and sell them on the idea that a behavior modification is worth it, so to say. And I was very intrigued by the overlapping between sales per se and helping selling somebody on the of life that it's worth to stop addiction, for example, or worth to see a therapist or something like this. And I would like to ask you right away, where did your journey begin? Like, how did you venture into sales? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I was, I think, 13 or 14 is when I had my first, I guess you could say, real sales experience. I was selling lobsters in a lobster store, whatever you whatever you want to call it. But basically that was like the first, and I was only 13 or 14, where I was actually responsible for, I guess, that communication process. It wasn't like a huge sales process because you're selling lobsters, right? But I would consider that sales because you had to persuade people to buy, let's say, upsell them on, different types of lobsters, bundle lobsters, whatever it is. It's been so long, I'm not a lobster expert anymore. But that was my first person-to-person, let's say, communication sales experience where I got comfortable with actually speaking to people in that transactional environment, because that's sales too. It's not exactly the sales I do today, but any situation where you're in a transactional, again, environment, getting someone to buy something from you, that's sales. So that was my first experience. I moved on to do quite a few things. I mean, I used to sell olive oil and at farmers markets. Again, that was my second experience in sales, and then just shifted up all the way into gym sales, so in the fitness industry. And that's where I got more involved in sales, and I developed a stronger passion for it, and I began actually enjoying it. And that's where, at that point, I started doing self-education. So courses, YouTube videos, reading tons of books. I've read over 150 sales books, a lot of self-education, and then applied that to my own real life experience where I improved my sales effectiveness through that way. And then I kind of transitioned into being a consultant, and now where I help people improve their sales effectiveness.
Yeah, I can vouch for you. You know what you're doing. It helped me a lot, and I don't give these compliments out lightly. Um, if we would travel back in time in order to talk to the Jordan Kales who sailed lobsters,
Yeah.
what did you do wrong back then? And if you could give that version of yourself, like I don't know, a couple of advice tips, what would be the first thing that you would give advice to that younger version of yourself?
I like that. That's a good question. Well, let because I think it would be more effective to go back to where I used to do gym sales and give a piece of advice to that Jordan. And that piece of advice would be not to be afraid, because I really used to be afraid to challenge objections. When someone were to tell me that they want to think about it, or it's too expensive, or they can't afford it, whatever the objection is, I used to just say, okay, cool, no problem. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. Where you're really passive. That passiveness was a mistake that I would go back and tell myself, look, and I'd give myself the right way to correct that, because being really passive in sales, when you're just so afraid to challenge people's objections and overcome them confidently, when you know it's the right decision for them to make based on what they told you, that's a mistake that not only I used to make, I think most people, if not everyone, has either made it and corrected it, or are still making the same mistake throughout their sales conversations. And that's costing them a lot of money and a lot of sales.
Interesting. Yeah, one of the things that was always interesting is that you preach constantly on your channel about, and it's is the difference between telling somebody to buy and using questions in order to help that person to go on a journey where they find out for themselves if this investment is worth it. Because in my private practice, like often I have people who have very difficult life situations, and it's a big challenge for me to, even when you see a problem, you can't tell that person this is what you have to do. No, this is an asshole. It's every time I do this, I lose the connection with my client, and sometimes I lose them as such. The only thing that works for me is to ask them questions where it's their discovery and not me telling them how to live in a way. Can you tell us a little about where that particular shift happened for you?
Yeah, most definitely. Well, two things. One thing, I like the saying that selling isn't telling, right? Telling someone that they need to do something or they have to do something, it really only makes them want to do the opposite. It's like telling a teenager, don't do this. They'll just do it, right? And the specific reason for that, it's called psychological reactance. And when you tell someone they have to do something, they naturally want to do the opposite. So through my own experience, again, this is also when I was still in that gym, the fitness industry space, I never found it effective when when I found myself in a position telling someone, look, you need to do this today. Like you know how bad you need this. Do it today. Do it today. I've never found that to really work. Whereas when you take a more of a Socratic approach, where you're asking questions that, like you said, make the prospect realize that, hey, like this is the best decision for me. And number one, there's a difference between sales and then manipulation. Sales is helping people help themselves, even when they necessarily don't always want to and are hesitant to do so, but it's in their best interest. And then there's like manipulative selling, when you're just trying to get their money and you're not selling something that it really adds value to their lives. But in that regard, I think it's really important to focus on that element of just helping them help themselves. And I think that makes a really big difference. And the way you do that is not telling, it's just asking them questions that make them realize, hey, this is the best decision for me. And number one, when they hear it from their own mouth, rather than you telling it to them, it's more powerful to empower them. They are more empowered to take action when they hear why they want to do it, rather than you telling them why they need to do it. And I found that to be really effective.
One of my favorite posts from you was send me this pen.
Yeah, you like that one?
I like that one. I had the honor of talking to Dr. Nadine Macaluso in my last podcast interview, and she was portrayed by Margie Robbie in The Wolf of Wall Street. So naturally, I also looked a lot into Jordan Belfort, even though that's a chapter for itself. Could you elaborate a little bit of what this sales exercise is about?
Yeah, for sure. So, and really it's a great segue what you just did, because the same principles apply, right? You know, in the movie one, that's not how I would sell a pen, as you see in the movie. But when you ask someone to sell a pen, a lot of people naturally start that conversation off by saying, how great their pen is, right? Like, this is the best, like, before even understanding who they're selling to, they'll go and they'll say, like, this is the best pen in the world. It has all these amazing features. And they'll go and they'll just list the features of how great it is, when they don't even understand, they don't even know if, one, their prospect is in need of a pen, because not everyone's going to need your product or service, or two, which features actually benefit the prospect the most. So I find that type of selling to be totally ineffective. The first step in selling anything, pen can be applied anywhere. You have to, number one, qualify the right person. Because if you don't qualify the right person, and qualifying means disqualifying a bunch of people and saying, hey, this isn't the best fit. Hey, this doesn't make sense for you. And that's the best part about sales. And the most important part of it is making sure you're speaking to the right person. Because if you're trying to sell a pen or anything to someone who doesn't need it or won't find the value in it, you're wasting your time. You're not making any money that way. So what I found to be most effective is qualifying someone. And the easiest way to do it is, when we're talking about a pen, just ask them, what type of pen do you use right now? Tell me about the current pen you use. Hey, do you have a pen? They'll either say yes or no. And that's important to know. If they don't have a pen, your conversation is going to be a lot different than if they already have a pen. For example, if they don't have a pen, you need to sell them on why they should have a pen, versus if they already have a pen, you need to sell them on why your pen is better for them than the current pen they have, based on what features are most important to them. And in order to find out any of this, you've got to ask them questions. Hey, what do you like most about your pen? What do you hate about your pen? If you could change your pen to better fit your needs, how would you do that? What would it look like? And most prospects are open to answering these questions, because most prospects are not so, and number one, if you're dealing with a closed-minded person, you don't want to do business with them anyways. But most people are reasonable, and they'll answer questions like that because they always want what's best for them. All they care about is themselves. They're always open to better and more effective pens, for example.
One of the things that personally I was surprised by was how we already always had sales in our lives, but just didn't clarify it as such. A story that just came to my mind when you spoke of the importance of questions is one of my favorite books is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I'm not sure if it's beautiful for those who haven't. He was a Jewish therapist who was deported to Auschwitz, and one of my favorite scenes from his life was where he was walking around the concentration camps and was looking for people who were depressed, and they were running into the fences because they were getting shot. And he would find these people and he would ask them questions. And sometimes one of the people in the purple persons told him, like, I don't have anything to expect out of life anymore. And he flipped that and said, could it not be that life has something to expect out of you? And he connected these people with a higher meaning, such as, hey, you have this one geologist had a book that he didn't finish, and he helped him to connect with those purposes or other people that he would live by. And he could even sell these people on the idea that life has meaning under all circumstances. And that's something that always switched with me. So we are just one question away from salvation or something like this. That was very important for me to have like this distinction between it.
I like that. It's really it shows you how powerful one question sometimes could be, and it can change everything. So I love questions. I love powerful questions.
About your upcoming, because I'm always interested about how successful people are created or are nurtured in a way. Like, what did you grow up like? What was that like for you?
You know, well, honestly, it was pretty. I mean, I'd say it was pretty normal. I didn't. I just. How would I say this? I mean, honestly, that my childhood was normal. It was good, friends, everything. There's really nothing notable about my childhood. I didn't have hardship like some people do. I'm very grateful for that. But again, growing up, pretty normal childhood, man. Nothing really notable there.
Hmm.
School, everything was enjoyable. I never really. Okay, here's one thing that now that I'm talking, it came to my mind. I never did well at school, and I never liked school that much. I never enjoyed it, and I really never found it valuable. And to even go further, they don't teach you practical things I've found or what I noticed in school. I went to university too. I have a degree in marketing as well. So I did 5 years. Um, and everything I learned, I've never found anything in the 5 years that I was at school to be really practical that I actually applied in business or anywhere. And I've learned a million times more by doing my own self-education. So that's how I'd answer that.
Yeah, I think we have that in common. I was a terrible student, and I'm currently in the process of building an online university, which was partly fueled by my disappointment with how the educational system fails to instill like a sense of passion for learning in the people here who are going to school in a way. If you could teach one subject there, what would it be? And if it would be sales, what would be the first class about?
Oh, it would probably be yeah, it would be sales for sure. Definitely sales. The first class, what would the first class be? Um, okay, the first class would be, if it's sales, it would be how to, not even how to, the importance of believing in what you're selling, because that's going to lead to greater effectiveness than anything else. You cannot sell something effectively if you don't fundamentally believe in it. A lot of people are involved in different, let's say even sales jobs, where they are selling something that, number one, they don't even use themselves. Big red flag. If you don't use it yourself, how can you convince someone else to use it if you don't use it yourselves? First thing. Two, they don't even believe that it works. There's tons of people that sell things that they don't even believe works. So if you're in that situation, your selling effectiveness will go down drastically. I'd say it's the worst idea to sell something that you don't believe in yourself, you don't use yourself, or you don't even think works. Would be the first class I would teach.
Was there a time in your life where you didn't believe in your own service that much? Because one of the challenges that I faced was I was groomed in the academical world, and a normal psychologist makes like $60 per hour. And I was like, the pinnacle of success was to me like, okay, this is where I revolve in. When I started how to learn how to sell high ticket places in my therapy or consulting service, one of the challenges that I faced was to let go of a couple of disempowering financial beliefs about how much something was worth for other people or how much I was worth as a person. How did you overcome this? And did you have like a similar time where you were a little bit reluctant to charge premium fees for your premium service?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I think most people relate to that also. And I think actually most people undercharge and are not confident about it. The idea of charging two, three, 400, $500 for an hour is makes them feel like, wow, I'm literally scamming them. Like, that's way too much, and they're not comfortable with that idea. So the first thing is experience. Um, to begin charging more and more and more, you have to have experience behind your belt, because that's really the only way to get comfortable. You're not just going to go into an industry and start charging $500 an hour, $1,000 an hour. It's not practical. You need the experience, because experience breeds confidence, and confidence breeds the confidence to actually charge X amount, high amount of money. So I think experience and doing it is most important. And the experience in doing it allows yourself, when you're actually involved in it, to see, okay, hey, I've gotten this person these results. I'm a little more confident about the value I bring. The more people you help bring results, the more positive testimonials you get, the more positive feedback you get from clients that you have. All that, the accumulation of all of that allows you to have the confidence to increase your pricing. While, to add on to that, you need to know the value of the product or service that you're selling. For example, let's say I were to just charge $300 to teach a few people for 30 minutes or an hour on how to more effectively overcome prospects' objections. The value, I know the value that would bring to someone. And to really hit home on that, if someone's in an active sales role and they really, as most people do, struggle to overcome objections, and they have, let's say, 100 sales calls a month and they're only closing 15 of them, I would know that just being able to more confidently overcome objections, they can double that. And let's say those 15 sales are worth $1,000 each. Well, why would I have an issue charging $300 or even $1,000 to teach someone how to overcome a problem that adds an extra $15,000 to their business every month? The value is clearly there. So the value needs to be there. And if the value is there and you're confident that you can actually provide that value, I think the combination of both of those things allows you to price high.
Mm-hmm. That is so interesting. Again, the similarities between psychotherapy and sales. For example, when a person comes to me and they have a behavior problem, let's say they are wasting time on social media, the very first thing that I do with them is to do an economical calculation of how much a particular habit is costing them in terms of time, energy, and money particularly, in order to help them to really make a change, to engage in an intervention that helps them to get rid of that. What really works for me is always to project how much it will cost them in the future, how much it will cost the people around, and who this is turning them into. And I was so fascinated because this is the same thing that helped me later on in my discovery courses, where I had people okay, my service costs this amount of money, but they have a scale in their head almost. It's like, oh shit, I'm wasting 20 hours a week. How much is this in a month? How much is this in a year? Oh my God, I'm wasting 50,000 a year. Of course, take the money. Just let's get going already. Have you experienced similar results with projection and questions that help you to help your clients to understand their challenges better?
Yeah, I mean, in regards to understanding the challenges, one, and if you want anyone to buy anything from you, you have to establish how much a problem. Once you identify a problem, you have to understand, like you said, what the cost of it. How much is a problem costing? Because that creates the urgency to take action. One thing that I found really helpful in order to, number one, get people to buy from you is you have to identify what specific challenges they're having that are preventing them from reaching their ideal desired outcome. Most people fail to do this. Most people just say, hey, you want to make all this money, or whatever your service is, or you want to get in better shape, or you want to, build more muscle, lose weight. Here, I can help you do that. Most people forget that important part of that sales conversation, where it's focusing on what are the challenges that need to be solved. And once solved, you can be at your ideal situation. And in order to do that, one is, if you're selling something, you have to be an expert in what you're selling. So know the typical challenges that most people struggle with when it comes to actually getting their desired outcomes. So for example, if I were to do a sales conference, or if I were to do a discovery call with someone and they don't have an idea of what their challenges are, I would say, well, usually my clients who are struggling to increase their sales typically find it difficult to overcome objections, ask the right questions on sales calls, or generate leads in general. Are any of these something? Which one of these do you find most relatable? And then that would give them some clarity and say, you know what, I struggle with objections, or I struggle with lead, or maybe it's all of them. But this gives clarity and it makes them see you as an expert. And then when you take it further, it's important to, number one, isolate the problem. explain why that problem is happening. This is extremely important. You can't just say, okay, this is the problem. Do you agree? The next step is saying, here's why this problem is happening, and here's why you aren't seeing results because of this problem. And then showing them what they need to do, what changes they need to make. Maybe it's your service, maybe it's not, in order to actually solve this problem. So where should their focus be and how they should solve it? And when you do all of that, at the end of it, they'll see you as an expert, someone who they would be happy to pay because they believe you can solve that problem for them.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You first create the urgency, right? And after the person is motivated to change or to invest, then you prepare them the particular intervention or service or product or whatever. That is interesting. When you think of the word mentor, what person comes to mind and what did you learn from them?
When I think of the word mentor, so I don't watch as much anymore, but when I first got into sales, I really do like, and he gets a lot of hate sometimes when it comes to sales, Grant Cardone.
Oh.
I really like him because he's the definition of a guy who, some people say he's more marketing than sales. Now he's more real estate. But he's just a straight shooter. Like, he'll tell it how it is. He's not afraid to overcome objections, and he's not afraid to be direct and just say things how they are to a prospect. Where most people are so passive and afraid to challenge prospects, I think I learned that part a little bit from him, and I really did enjoy his content. But as far as like a mentor that I actually had mentoring me, I've never had that. I do like Grant Cardone.
Did you see the interview with Grant Cardone and Jordan Belfort?
I did, and I love that. And I was live.
What's your take on that?
It's like a movie, man. It was so entertaining. And my take is that's the definition. Grant Cardone was saying really ridiculous things that to me didn't make sense. But the only reason he was saying that, in my opinion, I really have no idea if it's accurate. I really think he didn't like Jordan Belfort. He had some animosity to him before that interview, and he was just trying to say the opposite of what Jordan Belfort would say, just to argue with him because he didn't like him. And it came off in a way that didn't make sense. But I really do love Grant Cardone. He's such a funny guy. And I think he is incredible when it comes to sales. I really do. Like, I think he's amazing at sales. But that interview was so funny. I loved it.
Yeah, if that was interesting to me too, because you could clearly see it was in Germany, we call it Stellvertreterkrieg. It's when you argue about something, but you're not talking about the actual issue because there's another issue in the back that fuels the fight. Anyway, I think entrepreneurs are not only made through their victories or sales, but also through adversity. When you think of the word failure, what story comes to mind of yours where things weren't manifesting your desired manner, and what did you learn from that particular episode or moment from your life?
I'll give one that's kind of recent. I mean, well, the reason you know who I am is because of my Instagram page, right? So when I first started that page, my intention with starting it was just to share the knowledge that I had about sales. I like sales. At that point, I was actively in sales consulting as well. But I wasn't on any social media where I actually had where I was providing content to share that with people. So I started doing that. And when it came to growing my Instagram platform and my page, I found it really difficult. Probably 6 months went by and I went from like zero, I got barely any followers. And I was really, really frustrated with the fact that I couldn't gain any followers. And I wanted to, because I wanted people to see what I had to offer. But there's been, I think 6 or 7 times I was like, hey, I'm done. And it sucks to say, because like you really shouldn't focus on like growing, just gaining followers. But to me, that was important. It really was. 6 or 7 times I continuously was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done with this, not posting content anymore. And I don't know why, but I just kept coming back to it, to the point where I eventually saw some momentum and realized that the consistency, if you stick around and you do something in a consistent way for a long enough period of time, the results eventually start coming slowly. And slowly at first is good because you start building momentum. And before you know it, you're like, how did I get to where I am now? It started off so slow, but momentum is such a powerful thing in that compounding effect where I would get 10 followers a day. At first I was getting nothing. Then all of a sudden I put in more effort, 5 followers a day, 15 followers a day. And it built up to, like, at one point I was getting 1,000 followers a day. And I don't even know how I ended up getting there, because it was just the consistent effort. I was doing the same thing, but just consistently and not giving up on that. I think that's an important lesson I learned.
What do you think was the magic? First of all, like, what do you think was the magic ingredient there? Because I feel that I've talked to this also about. I think you know him. Do you know Christoph Nickers?
Of course, yeah. I saw
Yeah,
with him. Yeah.
yeah. I love the dude. I love the dude. Such a kind person. And one of the things that I was curious about is, like, when channels blow up like yours, and for people who know, like, how many followers do you have right now?
80K. I don't think it's a lot, but to me, it's a lot.
Well, in my world, you're very much trained to focus on the individual. If you help one person, you change the world in a way. Like, this is how clinicians think. If you would put 80,000 people in a room, I think you would be quite nervous, wouldn't you? Anyway.
Very, very, very nervous.
Yeah. What do you think was the ingredient? It's like, why do your followers, why did they stick around? What do you think?
I think a few things. One, the combination is because I stuck around and I posted consistently. If you want people to show up for you, you have to show up for them. So I was consistent. The second thing is I provided content that was niche specific. I didn't talk about everything. I gave someone a specific reason to follow me in relation to just one specific topic. Now, that's not a rule for success, but I found that helped me. I stuck to one topic and I narrowed down on that. And anyone who related to that, great. They followed me, they enjoy my stuff. And anyone who didn't relate to that, that's fine too. They didn't like my stuff. They didn't find it valuable. But I found that picking a niche, being consistent with it, sticking to it, engaging with your audience, are the three most useful things you can do.
Question. I hope you will understand this question. It's multi-layered. If you would build a salesperson from point blank, like Frankenstein, like, what kind of qualities would you add to that particular person in terms of beliefs, in terms of habits, in terms of skills, and maybe some resources or a mentor that you would provide that person with?
Okay.
Did that question make sense? Does that sound fair?
No, of course. Let's build it. Okay. So if I were to build the perfect salesperson, the perfect avatar, they have to have the most important characteristics would have to be empathy, assertiveness, and confidence. And then I'd say if we're building the perfect person, I'll add a high emotional IQ. So emotional intelligence, be able to, because you're in the people business. That's what sales is. EQ, emotional intelligence, is much more important than IQ when it comes to selling. So I would have those 4 qualities, and those qualities in anyone who's got those qualities can be an amazing salesperson. I think empathy is really important. That's what I would build. In terms of like habits, I think discipline. Okay, one more. The ability to not take rejection. This comes to, I guess, habits or mindset. Not take rejection personally and be comfortable with rejection, because sales and most things in life, like, you're going to get rejected. You're going to fail. And if you can embrace rejection, and every time you encounter it, it doesn't discourage you, and you have the mental fortitude to just keep on with the same enthusiasm, the same vision. Because a lot of people, when they, let's say salespeople, they experience a little bit of rejection in their day. They make a cold call, someone hangs up on them, or they don't close a deal that they wanted, day's ruined. They're depressed all day. They're sad all day, so discouraged that affects their entire day, sometimes their whole week, and they're just in a slump. So I think that is actually the most important quality or habit that they would have.
That is the greatest challenge for me also, because I was groomed in a system that solely relies on referral strategies. It's like when you become a therapist, you have a website and people come to you, all inbound leads, right? It's like, what did you do personally in order to triumph over your fear of reaching out? Because one of my favorite sayings is, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. It's like you have to knock on doors in order to eventually be let in. What did you do there, and what advice do you have for people who are like me, discouraged, and who it's really hard for us to, I don't know, to keep knocking on doors, because it's we take this a little bit more in. Like, what did you do to develop your elephant skin, mate?
Yeah, man, it's actually really tough. The only way to overcome that and get good at embracing rejection and not letting it affect you is through experience. You do it, you learn it by doing it. So really, the only quality you need is the courage to just start doing it. Because like anything, the hardest part is starting, and the first experience is also the most uncomfortable and difficult. So if you can get through that first experience, the second one will still be hard. That first door you knock on is the most frightening. The second one will be hard, but not as hard. The third one will be difficult, but not as difficult as the second one, and so on and so on. And before you know it, you'll be on your 1,000 doors, and you won't even care whatever happens. So the only way is through having the courage to start and continue, and that's it.
Beautiful. What do you feel is your secret for? Because there are two ingredients that are important for an individual to expose themselves to the one thing they would rather avoid on a regular basis. And that's two things I feel is endurance and but also faith. What do you feel like installed this within you, like the ability to act in spite of your discomfort, or in spite of your fear?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big reason is I try to learn, like, I'll give you an example. When I used to do gym sales, and I would, because I would struggle a lot, like I mentioned, with being really passive. When someone gave me, some people would always give me objections, and I'd say, okay, no problem. I want to think about it, Jordan. I say, okay, no problem. Get back to me, or this is an even better one. They would say, I really want to think about it. I'm coming back tomorrow to pay for this. And as time and time went on, I noticed not a single person ever came back. So the frustration and the discomfort from having to go from conversation to conversation where people tell me they're coming back and they don't, and it becomes so frustrating that discomfort actually begins to outweigh the fear of just saying, or the discomfort of just saying, you know what, screw it, I'm going to just start to do this thing that I'm scared of. And that in this situation, what I was scared of is just challenging their objections. So you become so frustrated, and it becomes so uncomfortable to hear the same thing over and over again and experience a situation that you hate being in, that you just say, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to do the thing that scares me, and maybe I'll get over it. At least that's what happened with me.
Yeah, I also have very bad success rate with people who say, yeah, I'll get back tomorrow. I will think about it. It's like most of the time I will never hear of them again. So that's
Never heard from them again. So like, and this is the perfect example. Like that situation became so uncomfortable, and it made me so angry that I guess I used that anger and frustration, and the accumulation of all of those people who said that to me. The next person that would come in, I would just be like, you know what, screw it. I don't care. I'm so angry. And I guess I used anger as a way to overcome my fear of wanting to assertively challenge objections. And I said, screw it. I did it. First time was hard. Guess what? The next time you're a little more comfortable, and so on. You got to be fed up, right? I think you got to be like fed up enough with the situation you're in. And this doesn't apply anywhere. This is just what I experience, is if the uncomfortability of the situation you're in is greater than the uncomfortability of just doing the thing you're scared of, that's when you end up just saying, screw it, I'm going to do it.
It's selling yourself, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
Exactly.
What was your finest hour of being a coach so far?
Say again, I missed that one.
What was your finest hour of being a coach so far? Any case comes to mind that is particularly meaningful to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know what? It's always the same thing every time, and it's not one situation. Actually, no, I lied. I lied. Okay, it is one. I'm going to tell you this. I've told this one before. The most satisfying moment and that like light bulb moment for me, because remember how I said I used to be scared to when I first started sales, like most people are, is apply pressure, challenge people's objections, and it was such a fear for me. And what shifted, and this I guess is the finest hour, is one guy at the gym that I worked at. He didn't want to sign up for personal training, but he knew that he really needed it too. So I was at now a stage where I was being comfortable with applying pressure to people. And not a word of a lie, we sat there for probably 45 minutes, him telling me him giving me all the objections in the world, but I knew that he also needed this. And he also said before that he knows he needs it also, but he didn't want to do it. Maybe it was the money, whatever it was. 45 minutes end up, let's say, you can say I pressured him, or what most people would say is I pressured him into doing it. And the reason I did that was because, like I said, I knew it was I'm helping him help himself, and he couldn't do it on his own. So, and by the way, his main motivation was he really wanted to lose 25 pounds. And he said if he can lose 25 pounds, which he's never been able to do on his own before, and he was about to come in and try and do it on his own again for the 5th time and fail again, because if you failed 5 times, you do the same thing, you're going to fail the 6th time. So I knew he needed this change. He just didn't want to pay for it. And let's say I pressured him into doing it because I really knew it was the right thing. And he said if he lost 25 pounds, it would literally make his whole life. He'd be so insanely happy. I ended up pressuring him into buying personal training. And then I forgot, I see at that point, I saw so many people that I really forgot about it. And it's not great to forget about your clients, but I wasn't involved in that process because I would just sell it and someone else would be involved with actually training him. But he came to me, I saw him 3 months later, and he looked so different. Like he lost over 25 pounds. And I tell the story a lot because I think it's really important. And he actually came to me and he said, Jordan, thank you so much for forcing me to do this because I wouldn't have done it on my own. And anytime I'm in a situation when I tell people the importance of applying pressure in sales, when you know you're going to help someone help themselves, I think that to me, that holds me accountable to doing it because it's obviously scary to do, to apply pressure in sales. But every time I'm scared to do that, I think of that. When that guy came to me, he said, thank you so much for forcing me to do this. And he used the word force, like I forced him. I didn't think I forced him. I didn't force him. But he used the word, thank you for forcing me to do this because I wouldn't have been able to do it myself. And he literally did what he wanted to do for years. And if I didn't force him, he wouldn't have got there. So that was my finest hour in sales.
I love it. I love it. And really, like, if you have a doubtful moment, just play the sales game with yourself. Like, how many people did you help? How much did their life improve? And how much more good were these people do because of the financial freedom that you provided them with? Like, it's very strange to think about these things. And sometimes I feel we are blind to the size of our own therapeutic footprint, particularly when we are in the numbers game in a way. Last question. I know I have like so many questions. Like we could go on for hours, but I know you have a call scheduled up. Kai Jung believed that the most important questions everybody should ask themselves is, what myth am I living? And it's such a powerful question, I feel. If you could have a question for everybody in the world that they would ask themselves, what would your question be?
In regards to what myth am I living?
It's like just in regards, like if you...
Oh.
A question that people should ask themselves in order to improve their lives. Like something I feel is...
Okay.
Anything that comes to mind? Otherwise, I will end up on a different question to make it more smooth.
No. That's a good question. And that would be, and this is also a question that I think is really powerful in sales, is what reason do you have to not do this today? Or what reason do you have to not take action today? And this really applies to people who have, like most people, when you're in a sales conversation, most people have been struggling with a particular problem for a long time. And most people are still always so hesitant to just take action in solving it. This applies to, let's say, losing weight, getting in better shape, anything financially in their business, their mental state. They struggle for so long, but are also so hesitant to just, let's say, pay someone to solve it. So what reason do you really have, or is there really any reason to just not do this right now? And if you really ask yourself that question and you really need to solve a problem, the answer is usually there is no logical reason as to why I should delay this another day.
Yeah. I think people chronically underestimate the opportunity cost of not making a decision or an investment. And one of your stories, you posted this recently. I think one of the person asked you, why should I take your course? I can also take this for free. And I think you answered this something like, paying somebody to acquire a skill is more cheap than if you acquire it by yourself, because I feel we underestimate our own time by learning something for ourselves, and it's the shortcut. Anyway, man, I will shut up now and leave you do your life. Where can people find you, and how can we support you on your vision of helping other people to become financially independent and helping them to help more people? What can we do for you, and where can we find you?
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, my only platform is Instagram. I love just sharing sales tips on there. I do a lot of reels. So really the only place I want you to look for me is Instagram. It's Sales with Kales. Everything there, everything else is on my Instagram. If you find value in it, great, but that's the only place I'd like to direct people.
Everything in the show notes, including your great book, and I will leave you be now. Jordan, thank you so much for being on the show.
You're the man. Thank you so much for having me, Daniel.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.